Well, coming to you from the Toby Family Auditorium at the Commonwealth Club, it's Week to Week for Tuesday, December 11th, 2018. Welcome, everybody. This is our special year-end Week to Week. We have so much to talk about today. And, of course, we'll be talking about that Oval Office meeting earlier today. You've heard about this. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mike Pence, individual number one. They were all there. They're talking about the border wall. Now, quite a few people have noted that during that meeting, Mike Pence did not say a word, and he barely seemed to move. This led political strategist Steve Schmidt to say, if you sit like that on a commercial airliner, what will happen is all of the flight attendants will have a meeting up front to see who should go check his pulse. I'm John Zipper. I'm your host for today's program, and today we're going to discuss that Oval Office meeting and other Trump news, the Mueller investigation fallout. Speaking of fallout, we'll talk about the election fallout and what's happening from that. We'll do a mini review of 2018 and more. And of course, we'll send you off with our live news quiz. And stick around till the end of the program if you want to win the grand prize of a one-year joint membership valued at $170. You must be present to win. Yes. Now, everyone is welcome at the Commonwealth Club, so any opinions that are expressed up here, and I assure you we're going to express a lot of opinions up here. They're those only of the speakers and not of the Commonwealth Club itself. Now, let's meet our panelists for tonight. I'll start on the far end with Carson Bruno. He's an adjunct...
Thank you.
He's an adjunct lecturer and assistant dean for admissions and program relations at Pepperdine University's School of Public Policy, and you can follow him on Twitter at CarsonJFBruno. Next to him is Melissa Kane, political and legal reporter for CBS Bay Area. Welcome back. And next to me is Dr. Larry Gersten. He's a political analyst at NBC Bay Area. He's also a lecturer at UC Santa Cruz, and he's also the author of his second children's book, Wendell the Working Worm. It's about self-esteem, and let me just be the first person to say it's the perfect Christmas gift, Hanukkah, Ramadan, whatever. And seriously, Larry has a few copies, so after the program, if you're interested in buying one, he'll be giving them away up here, and you'll be signing them?
I'm putting you in outside sales.
Yeah. I look forward to my commission. You can follow Larry on Twitter at @LGersten, so welcome back, Larry.
Thank you.
So there are question cards spread throughout the room. I think you all know how we do this. People will collect them, bring me the cards, and I will ask as many as I can during our hour together. So let's just jump right into it, and let's start with what's on practically everyone's mind right now. This morning, President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence met with House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to discuss the president's demand for $5 billion for his promised wall along the border. Now, with the press present and cameras rolling, things quickly grew contentious. At one point, Pelosi said, "This has spiraled downward." Now, the president got into a back and forth with Schumer, who maneuvered him into taking blame for any shutdown. So hashtag Trump shutdown quickly became the #1 trending term on Twitter worldwide. So let's start with you, Larry. Do you think the president went into this thinking he would be able to best Pelosi and Schumer, or was this an at the moment decision that he made right there and then and there?
We're okay if we take out the word thinking. This is a person who, as he says, goes by his gut.
True.
There's a lot to go by. And in the process, he really doesn't want to think about process. He doesn't want to think about anything strategic. He doesn't want to think about what I'm trying to get to. He's here to say what he wants, and everything else has to unfold from there. I think most people are not used to that kind of an approach. Mm-hmm. And so quite often you see what we saw today. We saw something very similar just a couple of days ago when it was all worked out that Nick Ayers was going to be his new chief of staff. Everybody agreed to that except Nick Ayers. And it was a minor problem there. And so I think what we saw today is just another close-up of this kind of behavior, which is comfortable for him, but I think confusing for a lot of other people.
Melissa, what did you think when you were watching this?
Well, I'm in contract negotiations at work, so don't tell my boss I said this, but I had the best day ever. My whole job today was to watch this about 11-minute fight and work it into about a 90-second package. And so I just sat there all day just watching this thing over and over again. It was kind of amazing. So, but I think he genuinely believes that this is a winning issue for him. I think he genuinely believes, at least among Republicans. And there was an NPR Marist poll taken around the end of November, beginning of December, that reflects that Republicans, a majority of Republicans, would like to see a shutdown if it means, they would rather have a shutdown than not fund the border wall. I'll say that. So at least among people who support him, he estimates it's a winning issue, and so I think that's why he sort of put it out there. But it really was strange because you usually watch these things at work. I will tell you, we sort of get this feed. We get the Washington D.C. feed, and so when you're sort of scrolling through, fast forwarding, kind of, and you usually see people sitting around the Oval Office. It's like, oh, wah wah wah, nothing important's going to happen there. But the fact that he took this, really benign photo op, essentially. He started out, welcome, Chuck and Nancy, so lovely to have you here. Just can't wait to pass that bipartisan criminal justice bill. And how about that farm bill? That's going to be great, too. And by the way, border wall, I'm fixing to shut it down. And it was like, what? So it was weird, but I think in his mind that was the right way to go. And even later, when he signed an additional piece of legislation, he doubled down and said, this is a winning issue for me. Yeah. I'm glad I took the reins on this. And so either in his gut or his advisors are telling him that this was the right way to go. And so he felt comfortable doing that.
Carson, it is interesting that he says this out loud. That, I mean, it's like he has no inner monologue. It's, this is a winning thing. That's how I'm going to do it. What did you think? Was this backing up his base? I mean, he just went through a kind of bruising election for his party in many places.
I have to say that I think the Schumer and Nancy Pelosi walking out of the White House was almost like a sequel to the Ocean's 11 or 8 or any of them, because the grins on their face and the way that you just saw Nancy Pelosi putting on her glasses. I mean, it was just like they had just robbed the casino, gotten away with it, and were like walking off into the sunset. And I think really for them, it was absolutely a win, just legislatively for their bases. It was a win. But then also the fact that Nancy Pelosi in particular, just came off of a very, very successful midterm election season for her caucus in particular, where they won the suburbs, they won the independents. This really kind of just cements that. If you think back to the end of the midterm election, I know we're going to get there, but I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. Yeah. President Trump really focused on the caravan and the Mexican border and kind of what was happening there. And it really utterly collapsed, I think, for the Republican Party, that topic in particular, particularly here in California, but I think a lot of other places, Texas, some of the other suburbs, districts that they lost too. So I feel like this, while maybe is heading toward the Trump base, as Melissa pointed out, it is a popular thing with that Trump base, but electorally that Trump base seems to be shrinking. And so I don't know if the Republicans want to be relying only on that. And it was a foot and mouth disease completely for him, for Pence, even though he didn't open his mouth, and then for Mitch McConnell, who was oddly absent from that meeting.
Yeah.
You can understand Paul Ryan not being there because he's on his way out. And you can understand Kevin McCarthy not being there because he's the minority leader now in all respects. But Mitch McConnell is still the Senate majority leader, and he actually grew the size of his caucus. So it's odd that he wasn't there because he's a little bit more political in nature and knows how to work the DC audience, and it just did not work.
Well, I mean, the big fight, I mean, the big sort of back and forth that you see, like if you're watching TV, if you're watching Channel 5, you'll see they're really, when they're talking over each other, a lot of that is Nancy Pelosi daring the president to bring this to the House of Representatives, the currently Republican-controlled House of Representatives, at least until January 3rd, and she's told him, numerous times, you cannot win. Your own Republicans are not going to vote for this border wall, this $5 billion border wall. And he kept saying, no, 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 no. The reason I'm not going to bring it in the House is because I can't then pass it in the Senate because I don't have 60 votes, and that's why. And she goes, well, no, go ahead. Let's get it started. Just bring it on in. And she literally said, you can't win. And okay, so I think that not just to your point, the midterms I think made people skittish on the Republican side as well, and so this whole idea might not even have the kind of support that it would require in the actual House among Republicans during this sort of current Republican-controlled Congress.
Now, Larry, we brought up another topic that was discussed there in passing, really, at this meeting, and that is criminal justice reform. And word is now that Mitch McConnell will allow a vote on this, and that is something that has some bipartisan support. Donald Trump has said he's for it. Is that kind of an overlooked aspect of today? Because that's a lot of people have a lot of hopes riding on this.
Well, so many times, the story that might have, gotten somebody some credit gets killed. Mm-hmm. It gets killed by the president's own, failings. I don't want to stress this too much because you already know. He has to be the center of everything. Mm-hmm. And so even when something like a bill like this comes by, and there aren't very many,
right,
and the Farm Bill too, where you actually finally craft a bipartisan thing, it gets lost in the weeds. It gets lost in the weeds because he is his own PR person and should be fired.
Melissa, Nancy Pelosi was the power person in that room, wasn't she?
One of the most interesting exchanges was when the president said, oh, well, we're going to have to shut down without a border wall, but I'm sure we can come up with a deal. But Nancy Pelosi, she's kind of limited right now because of her situation, sort of implying that she is just talking tough or she can't really, work the system with him because has yet to be officially elected speaker. And she came back immediately, pretty quickly, and said, do not characterize my power in this room, especially since I am the leader of the party that just had a huge win. I'm paraphrasing, but that's it. Hand me my Oscar. I'm going to play her in the movie. So she really, even though, and what was interesting is throughout this, she was really trying repeatedly. She kept saying, why are we doing this in front of the cameras? Don't you know how this works, sir? Please don't do this. So she said that, but then she was really very, she was right there in it. Whenever he tried to call her out, she came right back with it. So she was, a very, vocal participant in the whole thing. And once she did that, he sort of backed down and he didn't bring that issue up again. So no, she was definitely, to your point, sort of strutting to some degree. Certainly out the door, if not in, at today's hearing.
Okay. Well, let's continue on the Trump train here. He has, there are, and I'm actually being deadly serious, there are a lot of week to weeks where I try to make sure it's not all picking on Donald Trump because he is the center of so many things. He's had a very bad few weeks, very bad month.
Keep going.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I mean, he in fact, in this morning's meeting, he was saying, we expanded our Senate. I won the Senate, and Chuck Schumer said, when you're talking about winning, when you're bragging about winning Indiana and what was it, Wyoming, Nebraska, you've got a problem.
North Dakota.
Yeah.
But just in the past week, when people weren't busy laughing at him misspelling smoking gun, they were bewildered by his apparent inability to line up a new chief of staff after driving John Kelly to hand in his resignation. So my question for you, and maybe start with you, Carson, is there a type of person who could do this job in this White House? And I ask that seriously because someone's going to be consigned to that job.
Backstage, we were briefly talking about Theresa May, and it got me thinking, I don't know what's the least wanted job right now, Chief of Staff of the White House or Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And it's truly unfortunate that popped into my head because it is the case. I mean, you really have no one wanting this role, and it's a very pivotal role. And more importantly, this role that was really was a very powerful role in many past presidencies. So for the fact that no one wants to do this because they don't really know where it's going to get them, either humiliated or in jail,
Or both.
Or both, yes, I guess, yeah. They're not mutually exclusive, are they? Is a bad situation because the chief of staff is important. The chief of staff is the person who really dictates the tone, the professionalism, the everything coming out of the White House. It's not just the president. It's really kind of that pivotal position. And what we're probably going to be left with is someone who doesn't have anything to lose, which is not really a good person you want in a position like that, in my opinion.
Melissa, your thoughts?
Well, when we did the Sean Spicer event, and when I asked him about Melania, he said that the president actually listens to her. So there you go. There's someone that he listens to. She's right down the hall. The big problem seems to be that he doesn't, in order to have a good chief of staff, you have to have someone who listens, who you listen to, and you repeatedly ask the president whose advice he takes, and he says, "Oh, I got some pals," but really it all comes down to me. And okay, fair, but you really can't just have your open door in the Oval Office and like anybody can just walk on in and pitch whatever bananas idea that they have. And so to the extent that there is somebody that he would listen to, she's really the only name I can think of. Certainly the only person that Sean Spicer could think of that, whose opinions and input he really values. But here's the thing. Not only is he now basically his own press secretary. I mean, you never see these briefings anymore because why? He's out there just saying what he wants to say. You don't need an interpreter when the guy's standing there with a bullhorn. So he's already his own press secretary. I'm not entirely sure that this position is one that will be filled. Maybe he feels like he can also be his own chief of staff as well.
Larry?
Well, he is trying to cut the budget, so that might be an opportunity.
We appreciate it.
I actually am going to throw a name out there, Kellyanne Conway. I think she would be easy. Look, remember, she's got her own lawyer. You got that, okay. 7-second delay in TV, you got it, okay. Seriously, she knows him. He trusts her. She's done polling. She understands what the public is thinking. She's not afraid to take strong positions. And I think she'd be great for the job.
You're
really
just saying
do.
that because you want to see what her husband would tweet.
I'm not sure he'd defend her, but that's another story.
If you don't know the background on that, her husband often is tweeting very anti-Trump stuff while she's out doing like the most pro-Trump, Baghdad Bob type of defense of him.
I would just love to be at the breakfast table. That's all I have to say. But seriously, I really think she would be good for him. And I mean that with all sincerity.
So,
yeah. So.
Someone writes, Trump will prevail. He's taking an extreme stand as a negotiating negotiating tactic. Considering the wall and such, I mean, that is certainly a thing. Okay, I'm going to go out here, but actually, I'm fine if you guys come back here.
Well, he was interesting today. He said he wanted $5 billion, but he said he could maybe settle for less. And he said, I want a wall, but maybe not a whole wall, maybe just in certain places. So he seemed to definitely leave himself some room.
Maybe a door
to maneuver.
Maybe a door. Yeah.
He also said Mexico's going to pay for it too. So I mean, there's
someone asked.
He actually did say that to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi once the cameras were off. That the new NAFTA, whatever the new acronym is going to generate the money to pay for the wall, and that is how Mexico will pay for it.
Well, they are. They're going to pay 25 billion pesos, and they'll be settled.
Yeah, right.
That'll be that. Yeah. About $8 or something like that. Yeah.
On that question, though, I mean, the few things about the wall situation has always kind of perplexed me. But on the kind of the aggressive negotiation, this is not how DC works, though. I mean, that might work in a boardroom. That might work when you are dealing with a contractor. That might work in those situations. But in DC, it's all about finesse. I mean, if you think back to the ACA situation, people will say, yeah, Nancy Pelosi strong-armed them. But really, Barack Obama was kind of off to the side and kind of let Congress do what Congress did. And that was a lot of tit for tat, going back and forth. Pelosi going to her caucus and trying to make sure that she had the votes. The same thing in the Senate. And it wasn't kind of give me single payer and then work backwards, even though that's what the progressives and the activists wanted. It was really kind of, here is this, let's move toward that. And so for that, that's not just really functionally how the system works in Washington, D.C., especially when you have a split Congress, which now we're functionally going to do. On the border wall situation, why do we need an itemized number for wall when Congress appropriates the money and then it goes to the executive agencies and then they spend the money? So Congress could just appropriate the money to Homeland Security, to the Department of Defense, to XYZ agencies, and then those agencies decide to spend the money on the wall.
Could I add something?
Sure.
The wall is a symbol.
Right.
That's what it's all about. This is what has to happen in order for me to show people I mean business, I'm the boss. That's what it's about. And you know, let's, back to Melissa's point, several times this past year when he had a Republican Senate and a Republican Congress, and I'm told a Republican president, you know, there they all are. There are the votes, start counting, and they weren't there. Over 100 Republicans in the House would not go along with it. And I suspect that number now is less, because we are now entering a very dangerous period for the Republican Party, because either you're going to stay with him or you're going to jump off ship. And judging from what we saw just a month ago, I think a number of Republicans who are beating their chests saying, I'm all for what the president wants, are thinking it twice if they're up for election 2 years from now.
I think most of them lost, unfortunately.
There's also this interesting wrinkle where, so, you know, Democrats have allocated money. There's already in the sort of proposal right now, like a 1.3 or 1.6 billion dollars for fencing and border security. So what's the difference between fencing and a wall? Well, according to the Democrats in the last budget bill, they worded it so that it's fencing if you can see through it. Right, so it could only go to things that to like a wall that you could see through, which is how they said, oh, well, it's fencing, it's not a wall, it's fencing. So today, actually what was lost in all this was testimony today by the head of Customs and Border Patrol at the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And one of the things he was asked about was, do you need, first of all, he said a wall is important. Walls are good and they work. So I thought that was important. Then he also said, he was asked, do you need to be able to see through the wall? Do you need to be able to see the other side? Can we just get away with a fence? And he said, yes. He said, tactically, we have to be able to see to the other side. And so what I'm saying is what the Customs and Border Patrol guy was asking for is what Democrats are like, no, that's a fence. And then that I could see the president saying, no, that's a wall. You know, so a lot of this is really semantics, and that may be the place where there could be some kind of compromise, and everyone could say they won because the Democrats would say it's a fence, not a wall. And the president could go, well, we gave the Customs and Border Patrol exactly what they needed in the form of this kind of funding for this thing. So it's all, you know, I think there's a good amount of wiggle room here for both sides.
Okay. Before we move off of Trump, something happened last week. Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller, who, by the way, was a runner-up for Time's 2018 Person of the Year. He was in third place, ironically, right behind Donald Trump. But they did some court filings, right, that kind of revealed some things, or that people read in between the lines about some important things. And Melissa, since you're the lawyer, I really kind of want to go to you first. What did you think when you started seeing what moves the Mueller investigation
administration? I heard that.
What they made last week.
So these are sentencing memos, right? So Cohen's about to be on tomorrow. Cohen is going to be sentenced. And so these were memos about the extent to which he's been helpful and sort of what should happen. So that's sort of the context. There's so much that they're not telling us. So you definitely get the sense when you read that this is very much the tip of the iceberg, that they're letting out little drips and drabs of information. And what people forget is that campaign finance violations are both civil and criminal. They're sort of concurrent jurisdictions. And so when people talk about, the Obama administration had FEC violations, yes, and they were civil, and that's okay. But there's also criminal jurisdiction, and punishable up to 5 years if you knowingly and willfully commit certain violations. And those are definitely implicated here. I mean, none of this. There's that famous scene where the president's on the plane, and somebody goes, "Did you know about the payments to Stormy Daniels?" And he says, "No." And you just want to play that in a loop because Michael Cohen says, this was directed by him, he knew it, and it went through different business entities, and that actually adds on criminal penalties. So there's a sort of the reporting part, but then there's the did you know that this was being funneled through corporations part, which adds on additional problems. And so I was reading this, and it was interesting. They sort of gave you just enough to know that there was some serious issues, but also not enough to really understand the willfulness, because when you're talking about criminal liability for FEC issues, you have to prove state of mind, which just add that to the list of jobs I don't want. What was the president thinking? What did he know? How did that manifest? And so, I think that people who go on TV and say, "Oh, he's going to be impeached. Oh, he's a criminal. He's going to jail." That is not where we are. There still needs to be a lot more proof added, but it is not a good day for the president for sure. We just need some more information about exactly what they have. If it's just Cohen versus the president, that's not going to be that great. You need emails, text messages, other kinds of evidence in order to show that he was a big willing participant here.
Larry, what did you think? Someone in the audience asked about the whole issue of, it seems to be clear to them that he's being investigated, at least, as someone who's committed a felony. Is it too early to say?
Careful.
Okay.
In all seriousness, you notice in all those documents, his name wasn't mentioned. It was individual one. Now,
that could be
what
anyone.
does it take, I mean, but seriously, his name wasn't mentioned.
Yeah.
There were more words, I think, redacted on some pages than there were words left in. That means there were individuals, there were places, there were events, there were relationships, all these types of things that the special counsel is not yet ready to divulge. I think some of us thought that we were 3 or 4 months away, but the fact that there's so much that sometimes you learn more from what's left out than what you see. And the fact that there's so much left out tells me that there are all kinds of situations and events that we are yet to hear. Mm-hmm. And back to this idea of impeachment, let's also remember 20 years ago, I think it was, Bill Clinton was impeached for lying about an affair. Okay, well, what is an affair but a lie? That's another story, okay? Really. I mean, he was impeached for that. And his public opinion ratings were actually higher afterwards than before. What do we have right now? President Trump ordered that 2 porn stars be paid off. Do we impeach him for that? If the Democrats dared to do that, they would be looking at a redo of 1998. It would not be pretty.
Carson, someone in the audience says or writes, former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson recently said that Trump asked him to do things outside of the law. Do you think Tillerson has spoken to Mr. Mueller?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Mueller hasn't at least started talking to former members of both the campaign and the administration, particularly if he's interested in the president himself and or people close to the president. Just as a good investigator is going to talk to everyone to at least see kind of where the paths go. I mean, I think Larry and Melissa kind of really touched on a lot of great stuff here that I don't really have too much to add. But I will just say this, even though he spelled smoking wrong, he was kind of right in that tweet, in that, to Melissa's point, there needs to be a smoking gun. I mean, what ultimately got Nixon, because there's a lot of always comparisons back and forth to Nixon, are the tapes. him actually talking about it, his voice talking about it. That was ultimately what really got the Republicans to march down to the White House and get him to leave, because that's what cratered his support within the D.C. establishment itself. Without a smoking gun, it's hard to be really kind of convinced, that the Republicans will really walk away from him, that the Democrats will really have a strong case for impeachment. And then also the public will really kind of react against him, particularly kind of those soft partisans. The Trump partisans will always kind of be there regardless of what happens, just as we kind of saw with the Clinton era situation. It's really about the soft partisans that really kind of then create the cratering out politically for the president, for his team, for the Republicans, et cetera. So the smoking gun is really necessary, and Mueller knows that. I've sat on the stage quite a bit and said that Mueller is a great investigator. He's not going to be pulled down some sort of partisan alleyway on this. He knows what he needs to do in order to do what he needs to do. And if he can't find the smoking gun, then he'll go after who he has a smoking gun for.
Melissa, we learned that former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, the Mueller investigation team said, we don't think he needs to serve any jail time. He's given us a lot of info. What did you pull out of that?
Wow. It's just one of these, like, I don't know what's worse for him. Like, do you really want to be, when you've gone to the police station and then you walk out, are you in bigger trouble with the people on the outside? Remember back when there was the transition between Obama and Trump, and Obama didn't have a ton of, he didn't have like a long meeting with Donald Trump, but one of the things he did say was stay away from Michael Flynn. It was like one of like the three things he told him. There was like very few things, but one was like, that guy is trouble. And Trump was like, no, he's amazing. And I'm gonna hire him. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for the Trump administration for bringing on someone they were totally flagged, like, do not bring this person on, and then who turned out to give a lot of good information. And look, this could all be, there's still a lot we don't know. So maybe it's really important stuff. Maybe he just maybe he had some good things to say, but also hadn't done very many bad things. And so that's why he didn't recommend so much jail time. But it has to make people, especially Republicans coming off of the kind of drubbing they got in the midterms, really nervous about what is in the room, the locked room, I would imagine, where all the files are being kept for the Mueller investigation.
Here's the thing about Flynn. Let's remember, and there's so much to remember here. This is like, if this was a novel, nobody would buy it. I mean, really, this is an incredible story we're going through right now. And let's remember that one part of that, one little vignette of this, is the fact that Michael Flynn was in Russia, sitting at the same table with Vladimir Putin. This wasn't by the result of a draw. He was put there. And he was paid several thousand, I believe it was $40,000 to give a speech. He had direct contact with the Russians. This is about the Russian probe and everything that follows. Flynn is a critical character, and he has provided information about the Russians and what the Russians were doing and what they wanted from him as the forthcoming national security advisor. And I think that is going to come out in the wash.
Okay. Well, the Russian spy, whose name I'm blanking on right
Maria
now.
Butina?
Yeah, she has declared herself guilty and is now cooperating with the prosecutors, which I hope she's in someplace secure, because if there is a connection there, Putin doesn't have a good track record about those sort of situations. But you're starting to there are elements there where you can kind of see the work that the Mueller team is going into, but this is not ending anytime soon. This is going to be stretched into probably the 2020 election, if not beyond that. I just don't see how you get these things wrapped up within the next year and a half.
And one quick thing, there have been 16 special prosecutors, special counsels, they've had various names since Watergate. The average length of these investigations runs 3 years. We're now at 19 months, so don't be packing up.
So every time I get a question, it's like, what will it take before Donald Trump is impeached? It might not be until his second term, is what you're saying. I just said that to get the rise out of you. Okay, well, before we move off this, one final question. Someone in the audience asks about a Supreme Court case that I guess they're still hearing, is this correct, about double jeopardy. And again, I'm looking to our legal friend here. And it has to do with if you're tried and I guess cleared or pardoned of a federal offense, can a state go after you, such as, say, the Southern District of New York? Melissa, do you know?
For whom might that be important?
Yes. Do you know anything about this? And if so, how might it be important?
I mean, well, so the specific case, no, I do not. But I can tell you. So if you look at somebody like Michael Cohen, who's got issues, tax issues. I mean, if you're not paying your federal taxes, you're not paying your state taxes either. And so one of the things that Mueller has done is sort of plant these smaller cases in other state courts. So that they can pursue them even if something were to happen at the federal level to the investigation. So yeah, no, it is. It's not this. The case that they're actually kind of know a little bit about it, but the case that they're considering is not a tax fraud case, but it would have implications for someone who is both being prosecuted at the federal level for a tax evasion scheme and at the state level for the same thing and the same conduct. And so it definitely could have some implications for what we're dealing with here, especially since you can't be pardoned for state offenses and you can be pardoned, of course, for federal offenses. So those would live on no matter what anyone in Washington, D.C. did. So I think people are looking very carefully at that. But it's an interesting situation because in this situation, you have the Republicans or conservatives or the states' rights folks are in a very opposing position to what would be helpful potentially to witnesses and folks being prosecuted who are inside this administration.
Since when was there any intellectual honesty in D.C.?
Listen to you, such a cynic. It's all about finesse. They're all liars.
Such an old soul, Carson.
I try my hardest.
Well, let's move on to happier topics. Especially because one person has already written up saying, why are you talking about Trump? Well, he's the president. But there was an election last month, and it was a big election in many ways. An estimated 118 million people turned out to vote in these midterm elections. There were indeed significant changes, leaving the Republican Party in California heavily listing toward port. While nationally, the GOP slightly increased its hold in the U.S. Senate, and of course, the Democrats retook control of the House of Representatives. So, Larry, let's talk a bit about what we might see from these two parties. Obviously, the first place to start is with our U.S. representative here, Nancy Pelosi. What kind of strategy do you think assuming she will win, the actual vote for Speaker, what strategy do you think she will lead her caucus in?
Well, there's two things to say. I want to mention briefly about the Republican Party, but before that, Pelosi's biggest concern is not to overreach. And a number of the new people who were elected are fairly far over to the left. Not all, but many of them are what we call progressives. I guess that's the tool these days. And that's the term. And she needs to make sure that she does not leave them behind, lest she be left behind. At the same time, if she caters too much to them, she's going to be losing basically her base. So she's got to tap dance, and nobody can tap dance like Nancy Pelosi. So I'm not worried about that. Yeah. But I am worried about the Republican Party. I am worried because I'm an old-fashioned guy who believes in a strong two-party system, and I see this party falling apart. And I think it has to do with something very basic, and that is the Republican Party is facing the doom of demography, and it has to do with non-whites increasing their numbers at rates far greater than whites. And by about 2045 to 2050, non-whites will now be the population. So what does that have to do? The Republican Party has steadfastly refused, other than tokenism, refused to reach out to African Americans, to Latinos, to Asian Americans, to gay Americans, and even to women. I save the best for last. I go home with one. So I mean, it has been, I think, a real tragedy. And you know, after the 2012 presidential election where Romney got crushed, they had a big meeting. We have to do this. We have to reach out. We have to do this. And a day later, they forgot what they wrote. And I really believe that unless the Republican Party heeds this warning, I'm not the first, heeds this warning, they will basically lose any kind of credibility. And as I say, I'm a strong two-party person. I think you've got to have two parties to make the other party responsible and accountable, and that worries me.
Well, and I did read recently in California, some Republicans who, again, really got a pasting in this last election in the state, that some of them are saying, look, we need to radically rethink this party.
80 Democrats, 80 members of the Assembly, 60 are Democrats. That is a record since California became a state. 29 out of 40. Now, I know Democrats out there going, hoo-ha, terrific, blah, blah, blah. But what tends to happen is the big party falls apart anyway. Intra-party factional is the technical word. And you know, but you can't count on that if you're Republicans. Republicans can't wait for Democrats to fall apart. They have to stand for something. Right. And I think the time has come. They've got to really act.
Okay,
I feel better.
Well, so Nancy Pelosi has been pretty clear. She's interested in what you can get through. I mean, because even anything you get through the House still has to be signed by the president, has to get through the Senate. So issues of infrastructure, I think, is one that she's interested in. Amendments to the Affordable Care Act is something that she's repeatedly said she's interested in. So, I mean, we sort of know what her agenda is. It has to be things where they can find common ground. And so she's, you know, as someone who pushed through the ACA, she's really great at this, and I think she will sort of flex the muscle that needs to be flexed to make that work. And she's got a lot of work to do inside her caucus too. But these are the things that she has said, I think we can find common ground on. Everyone, you know, wants, you know, a public works bill. I think that sounds like a great idea. No one's really against that. Also, on the ACA, they want to sort of change some of the formula so more people can get help. So there's not a cliff, and in terms of people's income versus the benefits that they get, it sort of is more gradual. So very sort of things that should be more bipartisan. And I think for folks who are Republicans who are still trying to figure out sort of what the party means, they're also maybe in a more flexible mood, you know, and looking at how the party can position itself in ways that are meaningful for their voters, but that may also, in surprising ways, overlap with Democrats.
Carson, when Rick Wilson, is a GOP strategist, was here on the stage before the election, he was asked, of course, a question about the assumption that the Democrats would take over, and the House at least. And what should they do? Should they go for impeachment? And he said they should not go through impeachment. They, you know, again, there's no way that's going through the Senate, but they should investigate. Do you think we'll see a lot of that? And do you think we'll see too much of it?
You know, I think if Pelosi is smart, and Pelosi is smart, and she really understands how to lead, I think, particularly when it comes to a rather disparate caucus. Yeah. She's not going to be a Boehner or a Paul Ryan who can't really figure out how to integrate the far side of her caucus into the more establishment side of her caucus. I think she really understands that, partly because, I mean, she hails from San Francisco. I mean, so she's not an outsider from the progressive standpoint. She's lived it. She was a progressive, you know, for a lot of her career, and as she kind of worked her way up in the hierarchy, where Boehner and Ryan really were kind of establishment figures from the get-go, not truly kind of the firebrand far right, even though many people here might think that they were. So I think that she's going to be very smart in her approach of understanding kind of the tit for tats, how to kind of give those members of the caucus kind of what they want, investigations, you know, progressive policies, while at the same time understanding that she needs to kind of rein them in and bring them together. If the House Democrats just become just kind of what they were screaming about the House Republicans being, then the suburban voters are going to be like, well, why did we vote for you guys? Why did we not vote for Young Kim? Why did we kick out Mimi Walters? Why did we do all of these things where you were screaming and yelling about that exact same thing in the campaign? So I feel like she knows that eyes are going to be on her, particularly from those voters that are really now important, which are those suburban voters. When you look at kind of how the House won, the Democrats won the House, it was through the suburbs. And so that's why I'm not actually very hopeful, Melissa, that the Republicans are going to really kind of see the writing on the wall, because the Republicans who were more willing to see the writing on the wall are no longer in office. They're now heading to K Street. And so what you're left with are either the die-hard Freedom Caucus or the more Trumpinian members of the Republican caucus in the House, particularly. And you can kind of see it right now happening in California. What happened to the California Republican Party? Now, I've been talking about this for quite some time now, and no one really listened to me, unfortunately. But you saw what happened. I mean, they literally were obliviated in the state of California.
Is that a word?
Now is. Now is. I'm trademarking it, if it isn't. But that's the case. I mean, they were. I mean, they literally lost everything. 75% of the assembly is now Democratic. 73% of the state senate is now Democratic. Every single statewide office has been Democratic for a while, but it really was now. John Cox got less of a percentage of the vote than Dan Lundgren did in 1998, when Dan Lundgren was kind of the lowest of the low you could get. John Cox found a way to slip right under him with his percentage. And so, and the Republicans now, when they're talking about kind of who their next chair will be, they seem to be completely oblivious to the fact of what just happened. You have Travis Allen tweeting out, let's recall Gavin Newsom. He hasn't even been sworn in yet. And he just won with 63% of the vote. Like, that's not your problem, dude. Like, it's just, so I am unconvinced that Republicans here, but also Republicans nationwide, are really taking the lessons from 2018 to heart to really kind of maneuver forward like they did after 2012.
Well, you mentioned nationwide. Let's go to some other states. Someone in the audience brings up the efforts in Michigan and Wisconsin,
yes,
my hometown state, to basically tie the hands of or reduce the powers of incoming Democratic governors who will be replacing Republican governors. Is this just bare bones, bare knuckle politics, or is this, burning down the bridge after you pass it, and because they figure, we'll never lose power, so they'll never do this to us? Any thoughts, Larry?
Could be both.
Yeah?
I mean, it's the last hurrah. Certainly when it comes to the executive branch, Democrats won the governorships in both those states, and both states, Republicans who have nice majorities in their legislatures are trying to minimize the damage downstream in terms of the kinds of things the governors can do. Walker's got the bill in his desk. Scott Walker, I don't know if it's the Michigan governor's desk, but my guess is he's going to sign it.
He indicated.
Yeah, he's going to sign it. And look, this is hardball politics, and I know the Democrats talked about suing, and you know what? I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Legislatures have the right to change the laws, and that's what happens. And now it's up to the Democrats, if they want to undo that, to put together some majorities in the legislatures in both of those states.
Melissa?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the actions of people who don't think they're going to get another Republican governor for a while. You know what I mean? Like, the reason you don't do things like this is because you think, uh-oh, that could come back to me. It's not because they're all like, these decent, marvelous people. You do it for your own self-preservation. And so when you're going out and you're trying to take power from a role like that, it's a sad and very depressing prospect. It means that you think, to your point, if you're burning the bridge, it means you don't think you're going to have to cross that bridge again. Right. And that's kind of what it signals, is sort of a sad, desperate view of the future. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Carson, do you think this will be replicated in other states too?
When you start fiddling with process, it has a way of biting you in the butt. It's a double-edged sword. You think you're going to outgame the system, and then the system just clamps right back down on you. I mean, you saw it in Massachusetts way back when Governor Romney, or Governor-elect Romney, was coming in. The Democrats quickly changed the laws so that the governor can't appoint a new senator because they thought Senator Kerry was, of course, going to be elected president. And so then you fast forward to 2009 when there's a special election. All of a sudden, Scott Brown waltzes right into that Senate seat, which would have been avoided if the Democrats hadn't changed the law in the first place to allow the governor to appoint a replacement for the Senate. So there's tons of examples of these sort of things. Oh yeah, this is going to help us for this immediate next maybe year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then all of a sudden when they do win, because come on. There is going to be another Republican governor of Michigan and Wisconsin at some point in the future. Is it 4 years from now? Maybe not. Is it 8 years from now? Possibly. 16 years from now? The chances increase. There will be another Republican governor, potentially, of California, too. Will it be in my lifetime? I don't know. But there will be. I'm putting it on the record now for when this recording is seen by my grandchildren. But no, in all seriousness, no. Like playing the process game has a way of not working out for you, your party, your interests. But more importantly, I think voters are starting to pay a little bit more attention to those sort of things now than they may have used to before. I think partially because it's media, it's a lot more in your face. It's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, it's playing on Fox News and CNN constantly. So it's not just your local newspaper really talking about it anymore. It's a national news story. It's not just a Lansing news story or whatever.
Larry?
We have seen, however, some instances where the process has been twisted and with long-lasting effects, particularly when it comes to voter suppression, right? And we've seen 20 states since that last decision, 20 states that have changed the laws, most of them, not all, in the South, not all, most of them Republican, not all, to go ahead and reduce the turnout in a way that favors the Republican Party. To me, that is much more serious than the kinds of things going on in Wisconsin and Michigan.
Well, I mean, that does limit and they did it in Wisconsin as well, and that really hurt certain voters in Milwaukee. But those kinds of maneuvers also make it more difficult then for the Democrats to come back and
you now have a U.S. Supreme Court that has basically endorsed that, and so that puts it right back to the states where it once wasn't the case. So I think really long term, this voter suppression issue to me is far more serious and long lasting because of the way that the court system is now set up.
Okay. Well, let's review 2018 a bit, and I've just got some questions for all of you.
Isn't it over yet?
Almost. But first, let's just start with you, Carson, and go down the panel. Ooh. What was the most significant political event of 2018? What do you think?
I wrote some notes because I was actually having a hard time thinking about this in the airport this afternoon. Which the most significant political event?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to keep mine focused on California just to kind of help myself narrow a little bit here. So if I keep on coming back to California, that's why. I'm going to say it was the June gubernatorial primary because for those of you who have been here, I talked a lot leading up to the primary about the importance of us actually having a Democrat versus Democrat gubernatorial election here in the state of California. That obviously did not happen. Gavin Newsom, no surprise, got the first spot coming out of the top two June primary, but John Cox was able to beat out Antonio Villaraigosa for that second spot, which gave us a traditional D versus R. Republicans were pleased because they thought it was going to allow them to really kind of boost turnout in those competitive districts, particularly those 7 that Hillary Clinton won, that Republicans held. Obviously, that didn't turn out the way that they were hoping because they lost all 7. But really allowed Gavin Newsom to basically just skate right into the horseshoe. And not really have to put too much effort into his election, not really have to spend too much time talking about the issues, where he could just basically go on TV and just kind of say, well, I mean, he was endorsed by Trump, so he's Trump.
And it also allowed him to, when he was out on the husks, to be promoting down-ticket Democrats. So it hurt the Republicans even more there.
So California was robbed of an actual policy debate in the gubernatorial election, and we have a lot of issues facing California when you're talking about pensions, when you're talking about fires, when we're talking about infrastructure, when you're talking about housing, when you're talking about water. I mean, the list can go on and on and on, of which none of that was ever talked about in the gubernatorial election, and that the next governor, Governor Newsom, is going to have to deal with. And so if we had an Antonio Villaraigosa or a John Chung versus Gavin Newsom, the chances of that being debated and discussed would have been much higher. And so that was the most significant event, I think, for 2018, because it's going to have rippling effects for what we can actually talk about and accomplish moving into the next gubernatorial administration.
Okay. Melissa, what do you think was the most significant?
Well, I'll just say, first of all, that's why Gavin Newsom worked so hard to make sure that it was him versus John Cox, and spent so much money promoting John Cox so that he would make it into the final election. But so for me, I think it's probably and maybe this is just because it's recent. Although, am I the only one who time and space have kind of lost a meaning this year? I don't know. I'm like, was that last week or last month or 3 months ago? So forgive me. Maybe this is just something that's recent, but the confirmation of Justice Kavanaugh was so riveting and interesting, and brought up just an incredible amount of issues. I've never seen so many people at cocktail parties having discussions, and so many people sitting, and I don't know how much work. Somebody somewhere has quantified, like sort of like the Super Bowl effect. How many work hours have been lost by this, by people tuning into this. And so I think it was so important for so many people. It was a crossroads of so many issues for so many people. It is something that your kids and grandkids may ask you about, and that you would be talking about for a long time. And it is something that mobilized suburban women, which was really a big driver of a lot of these seats that flipped in the election. And so it was just the sheer importance of it, the sheer number of issues it brought to a head, the fact that it was so riveting made that, for me, at least, like a real linchpin of 2018.
Larry, most significant political event of the year.
This is hard. I mean, I love all my children. Now you're asking me to pick the favorite. I mean, this is hard. But I'm going to pick something different. Kristen Sinema, the person who won the U.S. Senate race in Arizona, which historically has been a Republican state forever, if not longer. And she won, close, but she won. And it shows you, back to the point we were discussing a few minutes ago, the power of demography, the Latino vote. The sleeping giant for so long is no more. Women coming out. There was a 23-point gender gap this time around between women and men. It played in Arizona. And you saw Beto O'Rourke, just to hop over, losing by 2 points in Texas, where you didn't think Democrats were allowed. And this guy got close. And again, it's demography. You watch Arizona be a blue state in 2020. Watch Texas be a purple state in 2020 and a blue state in 2024 because of the demography. And that's why, if I'm a Republican, I am scared to death.
Next question.
Happy note, sorry.
Well, the next question, and this might or might not be related to each of your events, but who was the most significant political figure of the year? Again, with you, Carson, first.
Okay. I had nothing on my notes. Because thinking, I kept on coming back to Trump, and I don't want to say Trump because, I mean, if you look at it from California perspective, yes, Trump was a major player in what allowed the Democrats to pick up those 7 seats, which cut the Republican caucus or delegation here in California in half. But that wasn't the only reason why they were able to do that. On that point, though, I mean, I'll say, and I actually don't know who authored this bill in the state legislature, but it was the bill that legalized ballot harvesting in the state of California, which might have been Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, but I'm not too sure. So don't necessarily fact check me on that one. But that was really pivotal here in the state of California, A, because it made the practice legal. And if people don't know what ballot harvesting is, it's completely legal now, so I'm not trying to make a kind of an illegal election fraud sort of statement about it. But it allows anyone who's not part of the household of that voter to go collect the ballot from the voter, the vote by mail ballot, and return it either to the post office or to the polling location to drop off the ballot. And we saw that really kind of play. The Democrats were very smart in how they went about this, and which really kind of allowed them to pick up a lot of these seats that they were losing on election night, but within the last few days of the count, really be able to kind of make up the difference and flip those seats. And they organized really appropriately in a lot of these districts where they knew that they were targeting, and more importantly, they did it at the very last minute, so that if the Republican consultants were paying attention to big drop-offs of these vote-by-mail ballots, they wouldn't be tipped off to it and try to scramble to try to make up the difference, which was very smart on the Democrats' standpoint when it came to winning those tough seats, particularly beating David Vallejo in the Central Valley and Young Kim in Orange County. So I will say, whoever authored that bill, that's your homework for tonight. Go look up whoever authored that bill.
Melissa, your most significant person.
Bob Mueller. I mean, is there anyone whose like breakfast cereal choices have been so poured over? And is a semicolon, not a comma. So what does that mean? This is a man whose every move is scrutinized and just absolutely picked apart. People desperate to know what's happening. If tomorrow you woke up with a superpower and it was the power to be invisible, would not that room be one place you'd want to sneak into as your new ghost self? To take a look at what's going on. Absolutely fascinating. The fact that he's been so quiet just makes it all the more interesting. And so I think the person who's been very sort of quiet, point of absolute fascination on no matter where you are on the political spectrum, everybody is interested in like whatever color tie this man is wearing on any given day. So I think he'd have to be my pick for 2018.
Very good. Larry?
I vote with Melissa. Bob Mueller. I mean, this is a person who has been conducting this investigation with 13 or 14 lawyers for 19 months. Not a single leak has come out of that investigation. The only time you hear anything about Mueller is in court, when there's a document, when there's a conviction, when there's a plea. And he has systematically, in his team, I'm estimating, interviewed upwards of several hundred, if not thousands of people. This is not easy what they're doing. People just don't go in and tell their story. You've got to find out things by talking to people who talk to people who talk to people, and it goes on forever. And meticulously, this person and his team has done what I think would otherwise be impossible, particularly given all of the obstacles that have been tossed his way, the way that Trump and his allies have tried to just completely tear him apart, the difficulties with the Attorney General's office, and all the uncertainties there. This guy is heads down, and he's just going forward one day at a time, one interview at a time. And I'm telling you, when all is over, this will be the investigation to talk to your grandchildren about. Mm-hmm.
Thanks to our great panel today, Melissa Cain, Larry Gersten, Carson Bruno. Thanks to all of you here tonight and everyone listening online and watching online. Have a wonderful holiday season, and I want to see you back next year.